Hi everyone, I'm Kelsey, the Ecology TA for Thursdays, and I'm here to bring you an introduction to stream ecology. Lotic ecology deals with flowing freshwater systems like rivers and streams and creeks, not to be confused with lentic systems, which are lakes, ponds, and swamps, essentially standstill, fresh-flowing bodies of water. Why are streams and rivers so important? Well, humans rely heavily on streams and freshwater resources for human consumption, agriculture, energy and transport, and many organisms use rivers and streams for habitats and other resources such as water, food, breeding grounds, and nurseries. There are various stream characteristics that are important to note to properly understand the stream ecosystem. Non-living or abiotic factors include the flow, which is the velocity of flowing water, light, temperature, chemistry, and bedrock substrate, among other things. Living or biotic factors include the presence of organisms such as invertebrates and vertebrates, as well as energy sources of a stream. Internal energy sources that come from bacteria, algae, plants, essentially primary producers that lay the foundation for the food web, are called autochthonous streams. That means a self-supporting system, an autochthonous stream. If the stream depends on outside energy sources, such as woody debris, leaves, animal waste, among other inputs, it's called an allochthonous system or an allochthonous stream. There is a lacking of primary producers to set the foundation of the food web and the trophic cascade throughout the ecosystem, so it is reliant on nutrient inputs from outside the stream. These energy source features in themselves go back to influence the invertebrate and vertebrate communities of the streams, and the types of invertebrates and vertebrates help create the foundation of the stream's community. So all of these things are tied in together and determine the community and the environment of a particular stream or freshwater flowing system. It is important to track and monitor stream and river health to identify and maintain the health of these freshwater flowing systems. The health of a stream cascades through the food web and influences bordering ecosystems. Contaminated water can harm agricultural crops, livestock, wild animals, and us as humans too if we drink or swim in contaminated or unhealthy water. Chemical variables, biotic factors, energy sources, habitat structure, and flow regime are all useful characteristics of a stream or river to track and monitoring the integrity of that freshwater system, as well as having a baseline data or benchmarks for these stream features to help scientists track health over time. Take a minute to pause here and examine all the features that go into these major stream factors, or take a closer look on the posted PowerPoint itself on Colab. All these features and nuances can be unique among different types of streams, and what may be normal for one could indicate contamination or major disturbance for another. So it's important to be familiar with these features in general, but also observe them for the stream in your specific study so that your monitoring efforts are accurate. Main stream stresses include pollution, impervious surfaces, and alternation of flow. Here are some examples of different types of pollution stresses. Toxic pollution comes from leaking pipes, chemical barrels, or chemical waste plants, and chemical use in general that can cause toxic leachates that are then facilitated throughout numerous ecosystems and communities as freshwater carries the toxins downstream, and this often causes organism die-offs and threatens human health. You can also have bacterial pollution, usually gastrointestinal pollution from animals or human waste, and this can introduce foreign microbes or parasites into the system and cause health issues for humans and plants alike. Further, the introduction of non-native species or organisms makes them invasive species, which without a natural role or niche in the community, they can proliferate unchecked or topple the existing food web, alternating the existing community and dynamics of the ecosystem. Nutrient pollution typically pertains to fertilizer runoff from deforestation, agricultural clearing, human and animal waste, and applying fertilizer, which leads to runoff into streams. This introduction of excess nutrients results in plant life in the stream overgrowing, and this can lead to harmful algal blooms or excessive vegetation that at times can also be toxic. And this can also lead to an acceleration of microbial decomposition of all the excess plant and algae materials, resulting in depleted oxygen stores in the water and that can lead to dead zones. You might have heard about some of these, particularly in an ocean setting, but this can also happen in lakes and streams. As for sediment pollution, it's an interesting issue because sediments are actually natural in the world or in stream ecosystems. But have you ever seen the water look really dark, muddy, and turbid after a storm or heavy rain? This is a form of sediment pollution. Typically, areas that are near construction sites or deforested areas nearby release a lot of excess sediment into the waterways, and this can clog the waterways. It alters the habitat and can clog the gills of organisms within the stream. The lack of vegetative cover and impervious surfaces near streams exacerbate the effects of the sedimentation pollution, and excessive sedimentation can cause health issues for the organisms living in the streams, as well as choke out the sunlight and begin to kill off the algae and plants and other primary producers, thereby affecting the trophic web, so the food web of a stream. Impervious surfaces relates to surfaces through which water cannot flow. Normally, after a big rain event, water soaks into soil horizon and recharges subsurface aquifers or joins the subsurface water table in saturated soils. Impervious surfaces block this action, so water must continue to pool or travel until it reaches a pervious surface or rejoins the stream. This hinders the process of recharging subsurface soil moisture in aquifers and also channelizes water energy from heavy rains and flooding into a more direct and destructive force. Another form of stream stress is alteration of flow. The alteration of flow typically refers to man-made structures attempting to alter or dam the path of a stream in order to harness hydrological power, create reservoirs, or move streams to more convenient channels. This is detrimental to the geomorphology of the river as it changes the velocity of the flow, so the speed at which the water is moving. This changes the discharge, which is the volume of water moving through a channel at a given time, and that affects various other physical qualities like the depth, the presence of riffles and pools, which are areas of fast-moving water like rapids versus slow-moving water like protected alcoves or pools. And many times, this also results in a backup or pooling of various detrital or organic material and chemicals or nutrients in the water, and can cause a harmful buildup by increasing the concentrations of such substances that would otherwise be redistributed, diluted, or leached from the system over time. So the RCC is the river continuum concept. It was described by Vanote et al. In 1980 and again by Minshaw et al. In 1985. And it suggests that as one moves from the headwaters to the mouth of large rivers, there are predictable patterns of change in abiotic environments that shape the local biotic communities. So river systems present a series of physical gradients from upstream, which is typically called the headwater, to downstream towards the mouth of a river, which also correspond with biotic populations accordingly. Ecological assemblages, the structural and functional characteristics of invertebrate communities, are hypothesized to change in response to physical, kinetic, and biological characteristics of the stream. Abiotic mechanisms that can influence the biotic community include the width and the depth of a stream channel, the rate of flow, so the rate of the water flowing through the stream channel, the color of the water, turbidity, which represents how clear it is or how much sedimentation is entrained in the water column, pH, temperature, substrate type, and the concentration of dissolved gases. All of these influence what kind of organisms can survive and thrive at different parts of the river and different kinds of rivers. So stream orders were developed to classify stream sizes as they move from headwaters towards the mouth. Headwaters are at the very beginning of the stream, and it is categorized as order 1, and the mouth of the stream is at the end of the stream or the river system where it dumps back into the ocean and is classified as an order 8. Two streams of the same order must conjoin to create a stream of the next order. For example, if a first order stream, see if I can get my mouse, joins with another first order stream, they create a second order stream. If a second order stream joins with another second order stream, they now create a third order stream. However, if two unequal stream order streams meet, they remain the order of the higher stream. So for example, if we have a third order stream meeting with a second order stream, the order of the stream is still 3. If we have a first order stream joining a third order stream, the order of the stream is still 3. You need a third order stream to join with a third order stream to then graduate up to a fourth order stream. And you continue down the watershed in this way. The RCC uses low versus high order classifications to suggest or predict general abiotic and biotic conditions that should be found at each, allowing for a sort of baseline or benchmark or a starting point of expectations from which to then gather data and track stream health. Thanks to the predictions by the RCC based on the stream order, we do not need to necessarily go out and survey every single stream for several years before we know what normal baselines or ranges for features like discharge volume, oxygen content, macroinvertebrate diversity, and so forth should look like for each type of stream. However, it is important to know that this is just a concept, a suggestion for how these systems work and what to expect. And there is still a lot of ongoing research discovering that there are expectations or exceptions or outliers from these expectations. And the jury's still out on how useful the RCC is for streams among different types of climates or biomes. Some characteristics of stream orders are as follows and also described more in depth in your ecology lab manual. Based on the RCC, here are some general predicted features between low order streams, so again near the headwater where the stream first begins, and high order streams, which is moving down towards the mouth of a river that dumps back into the ocean. Low orders are headwaters. They tend to have a steep gradient, which you might remember from Forest Lab. Gradient can refer to the slope angle, so they tend to be found at higher altitudes coming down steep slopes. They're typically shallow and fast moving. They have a greater canopy cover as well because they're at these higher altitudes, usually starting from a spring up in a mountain or forming from the snow melt from a snowy mountain cap. They are also typically forested and therefore have high canopy cover, meaning that canopy from trees covers the width of the stream. They tend to have cooler water, which is very well oxygenated. This is because cooler water accepts oxygenation more readily. It allows a better dissolving of oxygen into the water. They can be flashy or ephemeral. That means that they might not be consistent throughout the year. Maybe these streams only form after a snow melt or after a heavy rain, and they might dry up entirely over the summer. They tend to be allochthonous. So if you remember, that means that they depend on externally derived nutrients for the foundation of their energy source, so the foundation of the food web. They rely on leaf litter, debris, nutrients flooding in from the surrounding terrestrial environment. And they typically have lower habitat heterogeneity, but higher macroinvertebrate diversity. So habitat heterogeneity refers to different types of subhabitats within a system. So for example, if you have a tree or a forest with just many tall trees and no understory, that is a lower habitat heterogeneity. If you have a forest with an understory, with ferns, with a midstory, and then with have a high upper canopy story, you have a lot more habitat heterogeneity. So these low orders tend to have lower habitat heterogeneity, but higher macroinvertebrate diversity. So more diverse taxa of macroinvertebrates, which are things like your water beetles, your mayflies, your midges. We'll go into what those are more in depth later on. Your high order streams tend to be the midsection or mouth of a river system. They tend to be at a low gradient, so not on a steep slope, a much more level slope. At this point, they've typically reached a valley or are moving across more flat land. They tend to be deeper with a slower current. They tend to be at low altitudes and have less canopy cover, as in there isn't so much tree foliage spanning the width of that stream. They tend to have warmer water and temperature stratification. So cooler water sinks and warmer water remains on top, and this can lead to a stratification of temperature from the bottom of a river to the top. If you've ever swam in a deep lake, you might have noticed if you dive or jump in, your feet are freezing, but your top section feels pretty pleasantly warm. It's because all of that cold water sinks and accumulates. It's more dense, so it rests at the bottom of these systems. And if the water is deep enough and the temperature differential is strong enough, then you'll have the stratification of cooler water on the bottom moving towards warmer water towards the surface. These rivers tend to have lower dissolved oxygen. Warmer water is not as amenable to dissolved oxygen, so it doesn't take it up as readily. However, this is also an interesting thing to note because these rivers are autochthonous, which means that they have primary producers and they are self-reliant on energy sources, implying that they have bacteria, algae, or aquatic vegetation that photosynthesizes and generates the basis of that food web. And if you might remember from our discussion previously, vegetation releases oxygen into the water column as it photosynthesizes. So this is one particular point in which the RCC can be contested. They tend to be more stable, as in they are not ephemeral. They tend to last throughout the seasons, through the summer, through the winter, through the spring, and don't dry up. And they have high habitat heterogeneity, but lower macroinvertebrate diversity. So it's important to note high habitat heterogeneity, meaning because they tend to be larger and wider and have perhaps different substrate or different types of canopy cover. There's a lot more availability of these small microhabitats, but there tends to be lower macroinvertebrate diversity, so lower diversity of different types of insect larval stages, midges, mayflies, water beetles, other little aquatic insects, if you will. So next week would have been our field data collection had you been able to go. We would have visited a second order stream called Steger Creek. That's out in Troy, Virginia, which is a rural area of the outskirts of Charlottesville. And we would have gone to the Rivanna River, a fifth order stream that tends to be quite urban and which has a site we visit in Darden Toe Park in Pantops, just outside of Charlottesville, just past downtown basically. Note the drastic differences in characteristics between these two streams that you can already see, and keep these differences in mind. So Steger Creek has a homogeneous bedrock substrate. There are few developed pools and low overall habitat volume. I just realized habitat was spelled wrong. But you can see too, it's very forested. There's a lot of trees leaning over. You can see leaf litter off on the banks there, and we'll provide more photos as well to give a better description of what the stream looks like. And the Rivanna River here on the right has a heterogeneous bedrock substrate, so it has very different types of substrates, from silt to a sandy or gravelly type of material to large boulders, whereas Steger has mostly just bedrock, so large boulders or thick gravel and continuous rock. The Rivanna River has silt, sand, gravel, and boulders. And the Rivanna River also has well-developed pools and a high degree of habitat differentiation. It's important to note that Steger Creek is in a rather rural and undisturbed area, while the Rivanna River is more urban and experiences a lot of effects of human usage and terrestrial runoff. People fish there, they swim there, they take their boats out there, so there's a lot more human interaction, whereas Steger doesn't really get any visitors aside from our class 2 times a semester. I'm going to end this video here and continue on with the next video to provide a verbal overview of the types of data we'll be collecting and the methods, as well as an introduction to how we'll be doing some of our data analysis.